Okay, great. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to kick off e-commerce Reimagined. We have almost 400 attendees who've registered as of this morning, and we're looking forward to an amazing conference. As all of you know, everything e-commerce changed post-COVID, and to help the world's leading brands and retailers, and also to create opportunities for e-commerce tools and platform startups, we created this conference. And so for 3 days, we'll introduce you to over 50 startups and technology companies that are building the future of the e-commerce journey. Companies like Cameo and TikTok, the Yes, Blueprint Network, Roadie, and many more. Each of these companies will present on how they can help brands and retailers reach, engage, and sell to consumers today and in the new normal. As I've said, this is not the kind of conference where you'll hear the Warby Parker or Bonobo's founding stories, although they are quite interesting, but one in which you'll be introduced to companies who can help you redefine e-commerce. You also hear from a few large company marketers who have unique perspectives on the future of e-commerce. People like Ed Pilkington, CMO of Diageo North America, Julie Thibault, who is head of global fragrance and retail innovation at Chanel, and Jeff Weiser, who until recently was CMO of Shopify. This conference is meant to inspire and educate, but it's also meant to create opportunity for pilots, partnerships, and POCs. We will facilitate double opt-in introductions for any interested attendees. So look for that opportunity toward the end of the conference. So who are we? Let me share another screen. So who are we? Radicle's insights business, and we work with many of the world's leading companies to help them make better decisions about investing in the future. And that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean launching new products and businesses. It can mean partnering with startups to meet a need or solve a challenge. And it can mean making investments and acquisitions. If there's a future-facing need and interest, that's where we can be a partner. The core insight that underpins our approach is to tap into the expertise of people on the front lines. So founders and former employees, investors, and other stakeholders, many of the people that you'll see here today. To that extent, we're a bit like Gartner meets GLG. We help our customers navigate the future by leveraging the knowledge of people who've been there before or done this before. Our NPS is above 90. Our customer satisfaction is quite high, and I'm very proud of that. And if you're interested in learning more, you can see my information is right here. Today's agenda is in Hopin, and we'll show it in between each presentation. After most presentations, we'll host a breakout session, and every presentation will be recorded and transcribed and made available for you after the event. So if you miss a presentation, do not fear. Lastly, two things. This is everyone's first experience using the Hopin platform. As they say, fingers crossed, and wish us luck. And then e-commerce Reimagined is proudly sponsored by Silicon Valley Bank, the bank of the world's most innovative companies and their investors. We're very happy to be partnering with Silicon Valley Bank on this event, and are excited that they are supporting what we believe is a great mission. I hand it off to my colleague, Harry Simon, who is our Director of Research, who will give an overview of the e-commerce tools and platforms landscape.
Hello, everyone. I'm Harry Simon. I'm a Director of Research at Radicle that oversees the Radar product. For the conference, we conducted a comprehensive landscaping across the accelerating e-commerce space, which we'll dive into today. After giving you all a bit of background on the product, we'll dive into our findings. As Steve just mentioned, we're an insights business that helps world-leading companies better understand and engage with startups. Today, we'll be walking through our Radar product, which is at the top of the funnel during one's diligence process when trying to identify and source potential opportunities. COVID-19 is impacting us in one way or another. While we wish e-commerce adoption would accelerate more organically, COVID-19 has completely altered the shopping paradigm and is pushing US e-commerce to new heights. It's grown close to the same amount in March and April this year as it did the 10 years before that. The question most of you have on your minds is, how do you adapt to the changing landscape? When people can't go to the stores anymore and they can't try on clothing, how does this affect their habits? How do you engage consumers when they're opting to stay home and shop from their couches? Let alone, how do consumers discover your products when they're not going shopping malls? Your supply chains and even your products aren't necessarily set up for these types of changes and will require an aggressive shift to get into e-commerce. One solution, and of course, where bias is partnering with startups, trying new and novel approaches out there solving these exact problems. Whoops, apologies. I think I just clicked something. My screen is now back, I believe. So one solution, and of course, WordBuys, is partnering with startups trying new and novel approaches out there solving these exact problems across the value chain. Now, we have good news and bad news. The good news is that there are numerous startups tackling these problems in the e-commerce space. We've identified 405 startups across 26 unique sectors that have raised close to an aggregate of $15 billion in venture capital. The bad news is exactly just that. Where do you start? How do you identify the right partner? This is where our radars come in. Radars are what we call market maps on steroids. They'll take a thesis or a focus area, and in this case, the e-commerce value chain, and it turns them into a rich map of problems, startups, and sectors. Radars track where entrepreneurs and smart investors are placing their bets. I won't spend too much time here, but radars are outputs of a well-defined 5-week process where we use our metrics and clustering algorithms to hone in on high signal prototypes and clusters of activity. From there, we use our NLP tools matched with our analysts to identify the other startups competing in those sectors. Throughout the process, we run surveys and engage with founders for our problem space identification. And what is the output of that process? Well, number one, this leads to an insights report, which we're walking through in a bridge version today. And it leads to a web-based map, which we'll share later on during the conference. The web-based radar hosted 405 startups in the space, along with contextual information on all of the sectors, as well as information for all the investors investing in the e-commerce space. So let's dive a bit into the work that we did. The 26 sectors we identified fall into various buckets across the value chain, from discovery to interaction, purchase, fulfillment, and post-purchase. This encapsulates the time from when the consumer is discovering your product to interacting with it to get a better sense of the product, further influencing their purchase decision, all the way down to helping brands fulfill orders and returns if necessary. Shopping will look a whole lot different in a digital-only world. Like in our physical world, we'll have digital solutions that try to mirror that of our physical reality. As a brief note, this analysis does not include startups in the latter two buckets, so that's the fulfillment and post-purchase buckets. So to put some faces to the names here, discovery encompasses solutions like personalized online style platforms like Thread and AI-powered over-the-top advertising solutions like Riff, helping get your product placed into video content and in front of streamers. In the interaction bucket, we have your virtual shopping solutions such as Nreal, creating mixed VR shoppable shopping wearables, and the directly shoppable over-the-top solutions such as Network. Then in the purchase bucket, we have alternative payment models such as Affirm and other e-commerce enablement companies like Volusion, which provides end-to-end commerce solutions for brands. Let's take a step into the value chain and see how the stats compare. So Interaction has the most startups with 270 unique companies across 19 sectors, and has raised the most of these three buckets at $7.7 billion. The purchase bucket has the smallest amount of startup activity, but is relatively the most funded on an average basis, with $6.2 billion across 131 startups, with an average of $47 million in venture funding. As part of a radar, we group startups into sectors which are groups of directly competing companies. This enables us to take a bird's eye approach to looking at the different adoption and maturity of various solutions across the value chain. We look at standard metrics such as funding and activity. We have our own proprietary metrics with competitiveness, smart money, and funding momentum, which we'll define on the following pages. Lastly, we apply our green shoots framework to surface sectors that are up and coming and validated by high-quality investors. For the sake of time, I will not address all the information on these slides, Let's start off with which sectors are the best funded. The top 2 funded sectors here are video social platforms and alternative payment models. The majority of money in the video social platform sector is concentrated into Kaoshao, but we have other relatively new platforms such as Cameo and Triller in that space. Here we look at the sectors by who's raising the smartest money, and we define smart money via our investor quality score, which is a numerical representation of how selective and notable a company's investors are. If you can score an investor, then you can score a company, and if you can score a company, you can then score a sector. When it comes to looking at where the smartest money is being invested, we look at this from an average angle. So in other words, what sectors have, quote unquote, the smartest dollar. The top 2 sectors here are alternative payment models, as well as horizontal, resale, and consignment. The latter is quite interesting during this time, given that consumers may be looking for cheaper clothing options as compared to buying clothing at full price. Now, when looking at this from a total activity perspective, vertical reselling consignment is through the roof with 51 companies throughout. Now, example companies here include the sneaker exchanges, Goat Group, as well as StockX. At number 2, with 36 companies, we have live stream tech enablers. And these are solutions that enable brands to host and live stream content on their websites. Here we measure sector competitiveness, and we do this via our capital concentration index, which measures the degree to which venture capital dollars are concentrated into one or a few companies. And we interpret this as when the more money is spread out, the more competitive it is. And unsurprisingly, following from the previous slide, vertical reselling consignment is the most competitive where the dollars are evenly spread out. Worth noting here that the total amount of activity and competitiveness are not necessarily correlated. Later on in our market leader framework, we get to the least competitive sectors where capital is concentrated into only one company. Next, we look at the sectors with the most momentum. We measure this through our funding momentum score, which measures the speed and magnitude at which these companies are raising venture capital, pointing to the companies that are raising money with the greatest force. The top sector, again, is vertical resale consignment due to the immense amount of activity spread across the space. The second is e-commerce enablement, and these companies develop better tools to help brands create better shopping experiences. This is across the value chain, improving the product discovery down to purchase. Lastly, we apply our green shoots framework in order to identify sectors that are early in their life cycle with indicators of future success. These are sectors with a high number of high investor signal companies, and these sectors lack a big fish, meaning that no company has raised over $100 million in funding. We take this to mean that the sectors are early and initially validated by high-quality investors. We look for the sectors in the top left quadrant, and these sectors include SMS buying, so shopping via text. It includes live stream tech enablers, interactive content management, personalized online styling, as well as user-generated and influencer content discovery. You can see from these sectors that they represent a new era of online shopping, through shopping directly via text to having personalized recommendations, down to building a tech stack that enables brands to host novel content to better engage consumers. We've spoken a bit about this space at a high level, but we'll briefly get into the startups themselves. Radars are meant to identify problems, map sectors, and perhaps most importantly, uncover signals. Which startups are attracting sophisticated investors? Who's raising the fastest? And who's leading their markets? And we look at this through a few different lenses. The first lens we'll look at is investor quality. So for radars, we will bucket by stage for early, mid, and late stage. Investor quality means different things at different stages. Here, I'll point out how in earlier stages, investor quality tends to reflect team quality as venture investors overweight the team in the earlier fundraising stages. The top companies here in the early stages are Bump, which is a streetwear reselling consignment platform. Bump has raised from Y Combinator as well as Kleiner Perkins. The second company we have here in the early stage is Commerce Layer, which is an API and order management system that enables brands to offer global shipping capabilities. Commerce Layer has raised from SV Angel as well as Benchmark. Next, we look at companies from a funding momentum perspective. And the same logic applies. Stats mean different things at different levels. I'll highlight at the mid stage, these are companies that are reaching product market fit or going to market the fastest. And those companies are Look, which is a fashion discovery and e-commerce platform, as well as Fast, which is innovating a one-click checkout process. Fast previously raised a seed round in November 2019, and then 4 months later, raised the Series A. Next, we look at our first of our build-by-partner frameworks for market leaders. Startups don't operate in silos. We developed a few frameworks that analyze the companies in the context of their peers. Market leaders operate in uncompetitive sectors, and these companies to the right hold the majority of capital in those sectors. We have 6 market leaders that range in maturity. We have the early mover with Shops in the live stream influencer shopping space. We have Zhao Hongshu leading the pack in the shoppable social media space. It's important to note here, this analysis does not factor in acquired or public companies. Our second build by partner framework is competitive leaders. These are sectors where the capital is evenly spread out, suggesting a competitive landscape. These sectors range in maturity from SMS buying down to horizontal and vertical resale consignment. Competitive leaders may not be acquisition opportunities, but more partnership or investment opportunities as a push from the right person may push that company to the top. Lastly, we look at the investors investing along the e-commerce value chain. Investors are particularly important here as they are the ones identifying the trends early on with skin in the game. Active investors can be particularly useful from a network development perspective. On the right, we list the most active investors. We have Techstars, the accelerator, leading the pack with 13 investments. Additionally, we have 500 startups, GGV Capital, who will be speaking at the conference, SV Angel, and Y Combinator. It's worth noting that these firms tend to skew toward the investing in earlier stage companies. Now I will hop out of the presentation and do a quick demo of the website. So here, this is our web-based radar, and what you're looking at is the hex visualization, where each hexagon represents a sector, and it's plotted on funding momentum on the x-axis and investor quality on the y-axis. These are all bucketed by where it falls on the value chain in terms of discovery, purchase, and interaction. But perhaps most importantly, you're able to click into these specific hexagons and get contextual information on the sector. So let's click into voice-enabled commerce. Here you have our definition as well as the total venture funding, as well as tags our analysts have applied to the sector. You also get contextual information such as the customer type, product, and the business model, as well as our stats. At the very bottom, you have all those startups sitting in that sector. Now, we all know that people love tables and visualizations are great. So we have accounted exactly for that. We have all the sector, startup, and investor data in here. So let's click into sectors real quickly. What you will be able to do is you'll be able to sort accordingly by the number of startups, by the total amount of funding, investor quality, and our various other statistics. Additionally, let's hop into startups momentarily. Here, you can sort, and perhaps depending on what you are looking for, we can sort by the search area if we wanted to look for discovery products specifically. You can sort by funding, you can filter by location, And you can sort by investor quality and funding momentum. Lastly, we have the investor data, where you're able to see who the most active investors are in a given space. This ranges from Techstars down to GGV, Y Combinator, all the way down to Andreessen Horowitz. Either later today or tomorrow, we will be sharing the radar with all of you, and you will have full access to the radar as well as all the results. So thank you very much, and I'm here, I believe, to take any questions.